May 15th, 2024. A gunman opened fire on Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico in the town of Andlova. Footage shows a gunman firing several shots at the Prime Minister, leaving him in critical condition as he was evacuated to a nearby hospital. The Prime Minister's exact condition is unknown, but his deputy reports that they believe he will pull through. In this video, I plan to cover the background on who Robert Fico is and his political views, as well as the events that transpired on May 15th. First, let's look at the target of this assassination attempt. Robert Fico has been a figure in Slovakian politics for decades. He originally joined the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia in 1986, at a time when Czechoslovakia was a one-party state in the Eastern Bloc. In 1989, the Velvet Revolution occurred that ended communist rule and introduced democracy to the country. Fico joined the Party of the Democratic Left, or SDL, which was a spiritual successor of the former Communist Party. He was then elected to the National Council of the Slovak Republic in 1992, around the time that Czechoslovakia dissolved into the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic. Fico then became a rising star in Slovakian politics before leaving the SDL to form his own left-wing party known as Direction Social Democracy, or Smer. Fico then began to build his party as a left-wing opposition that sought to sever ties with the old communist regime of Czechoslovakia by prohibiting former communist officials of representing the party. Smer also absorbed many other smaller left-wing parties, which helped solidify it as the largest opposition party to the right-wing government in power at the time. In the 2006 Slovak parliamentary elections, Smer won the most seats of the 6 competing parties, winning 50 of the 150 available. Fico formed a coalition government and began his first stint as Prime Minister. His stint as Prime Minister was marred by several scandals, including one in which an apparent recording showed Fico discussing having recently raised several million euros for his party during elections and that these funds were not declared. In the 2010 parliamentary election, Smer increased its share of seats to 62, but Fico's coalition partners lost ground, which forced him to resign. The setback was short-lived when Fico and Smer won 82 seats in the 2010 election, giving him an absolute majority with which to form a government, thus beginning his second stint as Prime Minister. It was the first time since Slovakia's independence in 1993 that a single-party government was formed. All the others required a coalition. This second stint as Prime Minister would last until 2018, when yet another scandal would lead directly to Fico's resignation. On February 21, 2018, investigative journalist Jan Kuciak and his fiancée were murdered in their home. Kuciak was known for investigating corruption among public officials and businessmen and had been working on a story related to tax fraud among businessmen close to Fico's ruling Smer party and individuals within Fico's government. These revelations led to mass protests against Fico, calling for his resignation. He obliged and resigned on March 15, 2018. For the next several years, Fico remained in the background, though he remained a member of the National Council. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Fico was critical of his country's military support of Ukraine and re-emerged as the leader of his party once again, campaigning in 2023 to end Slovakian military aid to Ukraine and to block any attempt by Ukraine to join NATO or the EU. Slovakia had sent 30 BMP-1s, 24 Zuzana self-propelled howitzers, 13 MiG-29s, 4 Mi-17 helicopters, a Mi-2 helicopter, 2 Cub SAM systems with 200 missiles, and an S-300 SAM system to the Ukrainians. In exchange for all this, Slovakia received extensive support from their EU and NATO partners. This included 15 Leopard 2A4 tanks from Germany to replace the BMPs, 250 million euros for the MiGs and Cub SAMs, as well as an offer from the United States for Slovakia to purchase 12 AH-1Z Vipers with 500 Hellfire missiles at a 66% discount due to Slovakia's support for Ukraine and due to a delay in the delivery of 14 F-16s intended to replace the MiGs sent to Ukraine. In addition to wanting to stop aid, he also regurgitated Russian talking points, such as blaming Ukrainian Nazis for provoking Russia into invading. Fico has also expressed views that would normally be seen as right-wing issues. He has campaigned against LGBT rights, as well as having stood against migration into Slovakia. This has led to him being labeled as more of a populist leader now, politically. Fico's stances ultimately led to an electoral victory in September of 2023, with 42 seats having been won, and Fico forming another coalition government and becoming prime minister for a third time. Despite his electoral promises to stop military aid and advocate for peace in Ukraine, Fico supported a bill that would allow the Slovakian Defense Ministry to approve arms sales that would include Ukraine in an apparent reversal of his election promises. He also has stated that he will not prevent companies from sending arms to Ukraine. Slovakia has a robust domestic arms industry that has seen tens of millions of dollars worth of business come their way due to their ability to produce things such as 155mm artillery shells that Ukraine desperately needs. Now, let's move on to the assassination attempt. Much of this information is subject to change due to the fact that a ton of information still needs to come out. According to reports and the video evidence, Prime Minister Fico had left the House of Culture in the town of Handlova after a meeting. It appears that the Prime Minister went to greet a group of onlookers when a man pulled a gun and fired 5 rounds at Fico, with at least 2 or possibly 3 having struck Fico. The shooter was quickly detained and Fico was rushed to a vehicle before being taken to a helicopter and flown to F.D. Roosevelt Hospital and taken into emergency surgery. According to Deputy Prime Minister Tomas Taraba, Prime Minister Fico is expected to survive. The assassination attempt appears to have been politically motivated per Slovakian sources. The perpetrator has been identified as a 71-year-old man who had been critical of Fico on social media. As you can imagine, conspiracy theories have already begun to run rampant on Twitter, with many already accusing Ukraine or the United States or others of being responsible due to his pro-Russian views. As I've already pointed out, Fico has already reversed his position on Ukraine aid. In addition, Fico has been a political figure in Slovakia for over 30 years, with several corruption scandals already having hit close to home for him, as well as having been forced to resign in the wake of mass protests. Someone with that extensive of a political history is certain to have people that wholeheartedly despise him. Still, that is no excuse for someone to attempt to take his life, and this type of political violence needs to be condemned in the strongest terms. Regardless of your politics or your absolute disdain for certain politicians, violence such as this is not the solution and will not bring about the result you think it will. Democratic governments and their institutions are bigger than any individual. I will continue to monitor the situation for any major updates, especially pertaining to Prime Minister Fico's condition. In the meantime, I hope you found this informative, and I implore you to beware the large amount of disinformation and conspiracies floating around already after this tragic event. And with that, I'll see you on the next one.